Welcome to the How of Business with your host, Henry Lopez, the podcast that helps you start, run, and grow your small business. And now, here is your host.
Welcome to the How of Business podcast. This is Henry Lopez, and this episode is about competitiveness. The question I'll address on this episode is your business competitive? Whether you're starting a new business or running and growing an existing small business, you must be able to beat the competition on a regular basis in your selected market to remain a viable business. On a previous episode of the How of Business podcast, episode 532, I shared my thoughts on the higher level question related to this, which is your business model broken? How can you tell and how can you fix it? Because a strong and healthy business model supports a business that is consistently profitable, can scale, and remains competitive. Then on episode 537, I focused specifically on profitability. And on episode 539, that episode was all about scalability. So on this episode, I'm going to share some additional thoughts on remaining competitive in your market or expanding or shifting into new markets in order to remain competitive. To get all of the How of Business resources, including the show notes page for this episode, and to learn more about my coaching programs, please visit thehowofbusiness.com. I also invite you to please consider supporting this podcast on Patreon. And please subscribe wherever you might be listening so you don't miss any new episodes. I also encourage you to download the Business Model Health Checklist. It's a checklist, a document that'll help you identify, is your business model healthy? And if not, what are the things to look for to make sure that you have either that you're planning for or that you adjust your business model so that it allows you to remain profitable and allow you to scale and remain competitive. So to define again what I mean by a business model, think of it this way. While the business idea is the what of the business model is the how. Your business model is how you will run your business to make a profit, to have the ability to grow, and to remain competitive. Staying competitive is essential for the long-term growth and success of your small business. And what do I mean by being competitive? Well, it starts with understanding your competitive landscape in the market that you're either planning to compete in or that you currently are in. We must know always who are the competitors in your market. What is their position in the market? Are they dominant, or is there truly an opportunity to continue or to, if you're a new business, to compete or displace them? If it's a new competitor that has emerged, are they going to be able to leapfrog you unless you change something? Those are all important questions that you always have to ask yourself. Again, whether you're planning for a new business or if you're an existing business owner. A tool that really comes in handy here is a SWOT analysis. If you're not familiar with the SWOT analysis, just do a Google search. You'll find lots of different examples. But it's a great way to analyze where you stand versus the competition. So what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are your opportunities and threats by comparison to your competition? And what does it mean to be competitive? Well, for a small business to be competitive, it typically means having the ability to offer a unique value to your customers, your clients, your patient, effectively meet those customers' needs, and sustain profitability even in the face of market challenges and competition. It means that customers are choosing you for more than just having the lowest price. And that's a key point, unless, as an exception, that might be your business model. But that's really hard to sustain, to lead with price, meaning being the low price provider. That's really hard for most small businesses at our scale. Remaining competitive also requires innovation, satisfying our customers. In other words, delivering on your value proposition for your customers, establishing and maintaining your market position, and of course, at least protecting, but ideally growing your market share. And it might also require, to remain competitive, might also require finding niche opportunities or other markets that aren't oversaturated. Now, we don't always have the flexibility to change markets. If we're in a physical location, for example, and we're under a lease, pretty hard to move our operations or move our business, our retail business, for example. So it becomes a bit more challenging. But even then, what we'd have to look for is within that same geography, how do we address perhaps a slightly different market? Or how do we adjust our value proposition? Which leads us to the concept of blue ocean strategy. If you haven't heard of blue ocean strategy, it's based on a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which is about how to create uncontested market space and make the competition irrelevant. That's what the authors put forward in this book, Blue Ocean Strategy. So What it advocates in the book is for creating uncontested market spaces, not an easy thing to do and not always possible, or what they refer to these uncontested market spaces as blue oceans, meaning wide blue open oceans. And this allows us then to achieve sustainable growth rather than trying to compete in an oversaturated market. So this is important to think about either as I'm entering a market, is it oversaturated already? Or it could be that we've been in a market and then it became oversaturated. And they refer to those oversaturated markets in the book as red oceans, the opposite, if you will, metaphorically, of a blue ocean. What comes to mind for me is when my partner and I started our first self-serve frozen yogurt business in Colorado Springs. We were literally the first to open a self-serve frozen yogurt restaurant in Colorado Springs in 2011, I believe it was. So untapped market, right? Blue ocean. The problem was, of course, that 2 years later, there were literally, I think I counted 14 competitors in addition to our second location. Oversaturated market. Now, the market has since collapsed back down to what is more reasonable for that market, what it can sustain. But part of it was the barrier to entry was relatively low. And so it was a trend that everybody jumped on. So what we had to do is we had to continue to innovate and remain competitive in what became an oversaturated market. But it's not like we could lift up our operations and move it to another town that didn't have one of these locations. We had to continue to reinvent ourselves to some extent within that same market. And that's what we did. Blue Ocean Strategy, the book, puts forward a couple of different ways to accomplish this. One is to reconstruct your market boundaries. So identify opportunities across existing industry boundaries, let's say, such as targeting non-customers or underserved segments, so a different segment. Like, for example, we might have tried to go after corporate accounts or private events, let's say, instead of just serving the retail public. That might have been an example. It also suggests reaching beyond existing demand. Look for untapped and overlooked customer groups, including non-customers, again, customers you're not serving now, who could become part of the new market. So expand that market or reach a market that didn't before think they might use your services or haven't used them before, but you're uncovering that opportunity. Here's a quote from the book that I think is relevant to this. Quote, "The only way to beat the competition is to stop trying to beat the competition." So what this quote emphasizes is that small businesses should focus on creating unique value in untapped markets or segments instead of trying to outperform competitors in crowded spaces. Now, I don't completely agree with that. I think part of it is that we do need to over-deliver. The challenge here, and I think what it's speaking to, is I often hear people say, well, we're just going to have better customer service. And the problem is that that's a me too, probably. Everybody else can say that. And is there really going to be perceived value in that in what you're offering? Here's another quote from the book, Blue Ocean Strategy. Quote, "Value innovation is the cornerstone of the Blue Ocean Strategy. We call it value innovation because instead of focusing on beating the competition, you focus on making the competition irrelevant by creating a leap in value for buyers and your company, thereby opening up new and uncontested market space." End quote. So that quote highlights the importance of focusing on innovation that creates new value for customers, allowing small businesses to stand apart or continue to stand apart or to again differentiate and thrive without directly competing. You're changing the rules of the game. It relates to the point I made earlier. If you don't do that, or if you're not ready to do that, your competition is going to do that. They're going to leapfrog you by focusing on innovation and figuring out how they get a competitive advantage against you. So what are some signs that your business may not be as competitive as it once was or that you might think it is? And some of these may be very obvious, but let's just go through this list for you to think about. First on my list is competing exclusively, primarily on price. So I mentioned this already, but it's so important. It is almost impossible for us as small business owners with our limited resources to compete on price for very long. You may have a model that proves me wrong, so fantastic, but you're not going to out Walmart. You don't have the scale. You don't have the buying power. You don't have the economies of scale. And so it's going to be pretty hard on most of these especially ubiquitous items, to be able to beat the competition. And it's also a downward spiral. And related to that, as I mentioned, if your product or your offering has become ubiquitous, everybody has it, it's a me too. Well, in a commodity market, it's all about price. That's what people are going to look for. Or if you're not effectively communicating the differentiator, the value of what you offer, then you're competing on a commodity, a me too, and the buyer is going to compare you against other competitors rated as equal as far as functionality or value, and then it becomes all about price. Another thing to look at is, are you losing market share? That's a little harder to measure, especially for us as business owners. But a lot of it has to do with, are you losing customers? How is your customer retention? And then indirectly related to that is, how is your employee turnover? How are you retaining your star performers, your quality employees? That can be an indication that they're getting either picked off by the competition, or they're seeing the writing on the wall, at least their perception of it, that your business is on a downward spiral. Are your revenues, of course, are your revenues stagnant or trending down, especially year over year? We can all have an off year. There are things that are unpredictable, things that can happen. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we can identify a trend. More detailed than that, what are our gross margins looking like? Are those decreasing? Are, of course, your net operating profits decreasing? And then are you stagnant from an innovation perspective? You've been offering the same thing, the same pitch, the same product for whatever length of time now. You're getting stagnant. So those are some things to think about and to ask yourself to help you determine, am I losing my competitive? Is my small business losing its competitive edge? If I can help you with starting or growing your business, including this component of becoming or remaining competitive, I invite you to schedule a free coaching consultation with me. During that free coaching consultation, there's no obligation, but we'll talk about what your current challenge is. I'll give you some initial guidance, and then I'll share with you my coaching programs, and we can determine if it might be a fit. So I invite you that if you're interested and you're looking for help, go to the How a Business website, click on the button at the top of the screen to schedule a free coaching consultation with me. I look forward to chatting with you soon about how I might be able to help you with starting and growing your small business. All right, so let's talk about now, how do I remain competitive? What are some of the aspects of that? I think strategic planning comes into play. So having on an annual basis at least, or out for a 3 to 5 year period, what is your plan? And that plan should include, beyond the obvious metrics of what we're planning to do from a revenue perspective and so forth, what are those initiatives? How are we going to continue to innovate? How are we going to continue to defend our market share against the competition? We have to stay on top of that and stay ahead of that in order to remain competitive. It's all about the power of differentiation, and that involves refining and changing your unique value proposition as the market demands. You can't expect that what was working 5 years ago or even maybe a year ago is still going to work for you today, because markets change whether we like it or not. People's perceptions change, how they buy change. So we have to continuously explore ways to identify what makes your business unique. How does it help solve your customer's problem or help them with achieving their aspirations in a unique way that only ideally you can offer? The question is, what is your truly unique capability or expertise that you offer? And again, if you're competing just on price, you will end up losing in the long term. Your business has to remain responsive to customer needs, so you have to keep your finger on the pulse of what people are responding to, what they want, and also trends, and remain agile and keep the business aligned and competitive. And in a lot of cases, what we have to do is we have to pivot. I know that's an overused cliche term, but it expresses it the best. We must either expand or pivot sometimes our market or how we sell to that market. That's that search for the blue oceans. We have to make sure that our business stands out, that it's offering unique products and services, and of course, exceptional customer experiences. A classic example of a business that successfully pivoted to adapt to a highly competitive market is Netflix, which transitioned, some of you might remember, from a mail-order DVD rental service to a streaming platform, allowing them to stay relevant as DVDs went out of favor, and in the face of changing consumer habits, which was shifting to now what became available, which was the digital technology, the streaming capabilities. And so they had to make a hard decision. I remember when that happened thinking, this might be the end of Netflix, but it was the right gamble. And sometimes that's what it takes. It takes a bold move, but that's what they had to do. Otherwise, they'd be out of business today, very likely. So pivots can be a shift in target customers, a segment, or going after a new segment, as I mentioned earlier, different distribution channels, certainly pricing concepts, overall business strategy, and maybe even switching industries if your business or business model allows for that. The bottom line is this on competitiveness. Staying competitive isn't just about competing, it's about innovating and understanding your unique strengths and continuing to develop those, and with a focus on your customers. What do they want? What do they need? This is why it's so critical as a business owner to be very attuned to what your customers are buying from you. Why are they buying from you? How are they buying from you? It's important to listen to that. And that is why the closer we are to the customer, the more valuable that information is for us to help us make these types of decisions. Staying competitive in business requires offering a unique value, understanding the competitive landscape on an ongoing basis, and using strategies like differentiation and the blue ocean strategy. We can easily come up with excuses or continue to wait and see for why we have lost our competitive edge or advantage. But we must avoid waiting too long to take action before then it becomes too late to correct the course of your business. Here's an action item for you. I encourage you to evaluate your business and identify at least one area where you can make an immediate improvement to remain competitive. Maybe it's in the area of innovating. Maybe it's looking for new market segments, untapped market segments, bringing in a complementary product or solution. Continuously look for those opportunities so that you don't become stagnant and it doesn't become too late to adjust and remain competitive. Remember to download the Business Model Health Checklist. You can find that at the show notes page for this episode at thehowofbusiness.com. This is Henry Lopez, and thanks for joining me on this episode of The How of Business. I wish you the best as you start and grow your profitable, scalable, and competitive small business. I release new episodes every Monday morning, and you can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the How of Business YouTube channel and at my website, thehowofbusiness.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to The How of Business. For more information about our coaching programs, online courses, show notes pages, links, and other resources, please visit thehowofbusiness.com.